prejudging and talking about this guy as if he's a murderer is one of the most disgraceful things I've ever seen from the American media. Yeah.
Vice President, what is your specific role in the future of Venezuela? And I'm wondering, could you confirm reports that the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was kept out of the planning for the operations because of her past concerns about military involvement in Venezuela?
So I've heard a couple of things. One, that I was kept out of the planning for the Venezuela operation, that's false. And another, that Tulsi was kept out of the planning for Venezuela operations, that's completely false. Look, we're all part of the same team. And one of the things that is really amazing about that operation is that we kept it very tight to the senior cabinet level officials and related officials in our government. And we kept this operation secret for a very long time. I'm very proud of that. I think it suggests that the team works very well together. Well, looking ahead, what is my role? Look, my role is going to be whatever the president asks me to do.
Has he asked you to do something yet?
Well, every other day, I'm chairing the meeting that we do on this among White House principals to talk about next steps to try to ensure that Venezuela is stable, and as the president has directed us to do, to ensure that the new Venezuelan government actually listens to the United States and does what the United States needs it to do under our country's best interest. So I'm going to be as involved as the president wants me to be. So far, that's been very involved, and I'll keep on doing that so long as the president asks me to do it. The purple.
Yes.
Even beyond the war powers resolution.
We'll go purple and then we'll go pink or whatever that is in front.
Royal purple.
And then beige.
All right.
Okay.
Are there any indications, you talked about the network, are there any indications that the lady who was shot, I know there are different reports from there, her wife said they were new to the area. Are there any indications she may have been a paid agitator, and maybe that there are others that were brought to the area, considering everything that's going on in Minneapolis?
I wouldn't say that she was paid. I don't have the evidence to say that one way or the other. What I do know is that she was violating the law. And if you just look at the eyewitness accounts, they were saying she was there to prevent the enforcement of the law. She was trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. That much is obviously clear. The rest of it, of course, is part of the reason why we investigate this stuff. Yeah.
Mr. Vice President, even beyond the war powers resolution today, Congress has bucked President Trump on issues like tariffs. Are you concerned that President Trump is losing his grip on Republicans in the Congress, and what are you going to do about it?
No, I'm not concerned at all. First of all, we talked to some of the senators who are going to vote the wrong way, in my view, on this resolution today. Much of their argument was based more on a legal technicality than any disagreement in policy. If you look at the people who actually voted, every single one of them have supported the administration's plan. Second of all, as the president, I believe himself, has already said, every president, Democrat or Republican, believes the War Powers Act is fundamentally a fake and unconstitutional law. It's not going to change anything about how we conduct foreign policy over the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, and that'll continue to be how we approach things. Go ahead.
President. So we are seeing, regarding Iran, we are seeing the protests in Iran these days. The cities are begging for help from the U.S. and Israel, naming streets in the city after President Trump. It seems there is an opportunity here that may not come again. Will the United States stand by the citizens of Iran? And if Israel decides to strike again the nuclear sites in Iran, is the U.S. expected to take part?
Well, look, we certainly stand by anybody who's engaged in peaceful protest, anybody who's trying to exert their rights for free association and to have their voices heard. Obviously, the Iranian regime has a lot of problems. And as the President of the United States has said, the smartest thing for them to have done, it was true 2 months ago, it's true today, is for them to actually have a real negotiation with the United States about what we need to see when it comes to their nuclear program. I'll let the President speak to what we're going to do in the future, but we certainly stand with anybody across the world, including the Iranian people who are advocating for their rights. I'll take just a couple more questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Concerning Venezuela, how would you assure the Caribbean region that they will remain a zone of peace? Because some member states in the region are concerned.
Well, look, the president had a very productive phone call with the president of Colombia yesterday, and we continue to talk at all levels of government with a number of our friends in the Caribbean region. I actually think this is really good for peace in the Caribbean, because when you take away a major source of illegal cartel revenue, which is the cocaine trade, the fentanyl trade, other sources of illicit revenue, you actually remove the power of one of the main destabilizing forces in Latin America and in the Caribbean. I really do think, look, we say it all the time, this is the president of peace. One of the ways that you establish peace in your own hemisphere is to make it clear that the United States is going to be respected, that the United States is willing to take power away from criminal cartel organizations and give it to legitimate governments. That's how we see the future of the Western Hemisphere, and we think it's going to be much more peaceful than it was certainly under Joe Biden. I'll take one more question. Go ahead.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. On Greenland, do you have a message for European leaders? Many in Europe reject the idea that the island could be for sale.
Well, first of all, Secretary Rubio, I believe, is meeting with the leaders of Denmark and Greenland next week, I want to say it is, but maybe it's the week after that. We'll continue to deliver some of these messages in private, some of them in public, but I guess my advice to European leaders and anybody else would be to take the President of the United States seriously. What has he said about Greenland? Set to the side the crazy overreactions that I've seen from the press and from certain people in Europe. What has the President said? Number one, Greenland is really important, not just to America's missile defense, but to the world's missile defense. Number two, we know that there are hostile adversaries that have shown a lot of interest in that particular territory, that particular slice of the world. So what we're asking our European friends to do is to take the security of that landmass more seriously, because if they're not, the United States is going to have to do something about it. What that is, I'll leave that to the President as we continue to engage in diplomacy with our European friends and everybody on this particular topic. And again, thank you all for listening. Thanks for taking questions. And I just ask you, look, this is politics, and often Republicans and get in arguments with the press about things, and I understand that. I think it's really irresponsible for you guys to go out there and imply or tell the American people that a guy who defended himself from being rammed by an automobile is guilty of murder. Be a little bit more careful. We're going to talk about toning down the temperature, which I know the President wants to do, and I certainly want to do. One of the ways we tone down the temperature is to have a media that tells the truth. I encourage you all to do that. God bless you. Happy New Year, guys.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Don Mai. You were just watching Vice President J.D. Vance at a press briefing at the White House answering reporter questions. He defended the ICE agent involved in the shooting in Minneapolis this afternoon, saying the ICE agent did it out of self-defense. And he gave a message to protesters, and that is to protest peacefully. Don't target law enforcement officers. Don't attack them. If they don't like a policy, they can talk to the lawmakers or protest to the lawmakers, but don't attack the officers. And answering a question on fraud in Minnesota, Vance said Governor Walz should resign because he says he's either incompetent or he's in on the fraud in Minnesota, according to Vice President J.D. Vance. And he also said that people should not feel emboldened, and this is referring to the protests to target law enforcement, because he says this administration will prosecute. Now, just a bit more on this ICE shooting at Minneapolis. Several people protested at a federal building in Minneapolis this morning. They chanted slogans against ICE, with some of the protesters physically confronting law enforcement. Reports are saying federal officers had to fire pepper balls at the protesters to contain the crowd. FBI Director Kash Patel says the Bureau is investigating anti-immigration enforcement protests. He spoke to Just the News today. Patel said agents are looking into protest organizers and funders. He said the protests may be impeding law enforcement operations and endangering public safety. Patel said the FBI is investigating paid protest campaigns nationwide. The review includes protesters, organizers, and funding sources. He said those campaigns may be driving illicit activities. And Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem addressing illegal immigration in New York City today. DHS increased law enforcement efforts after 2 illegal immigrants attacked Customs and Border Protection officers, shooting one of them, in fact.
The American people deserve dignity, they deserve justice, and we deliver both. So we launched Operation Salvo here.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem highlighting a violent attack in New York City, which took place during summer. Homeland Security published this video of the incident, saying 2 illegal immigrants attacked a Customs and Border Protection officer. According to Noam, the agent was shot in the face. The department says it believes the two immigrants tried to rob the officer. They fired shots when the agent resisted. According to DHS, one of the individuals is an illegal immigrant from the Dominican Republic. He had previously been charged with felony grand larceny, assault, and more. After the incident, DHS launched Operation Salvo, which Noam says achieved significant results.
We've arrested 54 individuals as a part of Operation Salvo since its inception just a few months ago. Those arrested are violent transnational gang members.
Noam also shared details on the deadly shooting in Minnesota on Wednesday. Federal officials say an ICE agent fired shots in self-defense after a woman tried to attack officers.
These individuals had followed our officers all day, had harassed them, had blocked them in. They were impeding our law enforcement operations, which is against the law. And when they demanded and commanded her to get out of her vehicle several times, she did not.
Anti-ICE protesters in New York City chanting slogans on Thursday, calling on agents to leave the city. The Trump administration is defending the agent in Minnesota, saying the woman who deceased committed an act of domestic terrorism. Investigations are still ongoing. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
The U.S. is holding active discussions about a purchase of Greenland, according to the White House. Joining us to discuss is Taylor Hathorn, visiting fellow at the Independent Women's Center for American Safety and Security. Taylor, good afternoon. So before we get to the Greenland topic, we just had the press conference. Vice President J.D. Vance sent a message to protesters telling them to not attack the officers. It seems like he's confident that the ICE agent involved in the shooting did it out of self-defense. Can we just get your first reactions to the situation?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to say prayers for both the ICE agent and the family of the woman who was shot in self-defense by the ICE agent. It's an incredibly tragic situation, regardless of which way you look at it. But for anyone who watched the vice president's presser, it was an absolute masterclass in explaining the difference between being able to object to a policy that is taking place that you don't agree with and inciting violence against the officials who were sworn in to carry out the policies of the United States and of the administration and the laws that Congress enacts. And so my initial reaction to this is it is a tragedy. It is an avoidable tragedy, but it is a tragedy that this woman inflicted upon herself. It is a tragedy that people who are using this far left rhetoric about attacking ICE agents, including the governor of Minnesota and including the mayor of that area, like this is not rhetoric that we need to have in this country. If you have an issue with policies, then you debate the policy. You protest freely to do so in this great nation about the policy that you disagree with, but you don't attack an ICE agent with your vehicle.
Yeah, well said. And what do you think about the AG that is going to look into the fraud that Vice President Vance just announced?
I believe this is incredibly necessary. Left, right, center, it doesn't matter. The American people all pay taxes, or I believe most of us pay taxes to live here in this country, and you shouldn't be defrauded in order to with your tax dollars. And so I think this position is going to be incredibly necessary to unroot the corruption. But, you know, I think what's crazy is if you listen to any of the conversations that have been happening over the last 4 years about fraud happening in this nation, a lot of people love to say there's no fraud, and just look the other way. And you got to give credit to this administration where credit is due, is that they know that fraud is happening. And whether that fraud is billions and billions of dollars like it was in Minnesota, or whether that fraud is $50, this is still your tax dollars as American citizens. And you should have the expectation that the government that is using your tax dollars, many times 40% of our salaries, that they are being prudent with your money, because it is your money, not their money. And the American people need to be reminded of that.
Okay, so Taylor, on Greenland, can we talk about why Greenland is important to U.S. interests? President Trump says right now Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. So we know Greenland is at a strategic geographical location. Do you think this is also about China and Russia and their actions, their increasing assertiveness in recent years?
Well, the Greenland is definitely an Arctic choke point, right? It is the largest island in the world, and we see the strategic location and importance. Just look at the Golden Dome project that the Department of War is taking on now. You can see from the graphics on the screen just how strategically placed it is in the Western Hemisphere and how important it is when you're looking at the Arctic region. And yes, China and Russia is completely driving this decision. They are becoming very predatory. They are becoming very, very intentional. China stated actually in 2018 that it was part of their Polar Road Initiative, which is an extension of their Belt and Road Initiative into the Arctic, that they were going to try to conquer this region too and get a very strong presence in that region. And so, you know, one of the things that you and I talk about often is that it would be great to live in a utopian society where you don't have to worry about your adversaries and you don't have to worry about any other great nations that are trying to nation build inflicting upon your territory. But the reality is that China and Russia every single day, whether it is with their physical military, whether it is with their cybersecurity initiatives and the hacking, whether it is with AI or with regime change, or whether it's, you know, weaponized migration, they are inflicting to do harm on nations that do not share their values. And the United States is the #1 risk that they have to be successful. And so we have to beat them to the punch at every step along the way. And the American citizens, I think many of them, because they don't understand and don't read about these things all of the time, the media is not reporting to them how important it is that we make these strategic actions and that we work with nations like Denmark, with places like Greenland. We work in places like Latin America to make sure that the United States interest is first and foremost.
Okay, so you mentioned working with Denmark and Greenland. So Denmark is a close ally, and the U.S. already has bases in Greenland. And, you know, the U.S. can expand presence there as well through new agreements. So the question is, I guess, can the U.S. still have most of the strategic advantages from Greenland without actually owning it?
You know, I would love to say yes. And the United States is willing to partner with any nation, especially, you know, our alliances in NATO. But I think Europe alone has really shown how ineffective they are at governing their own nations. Just look at the weaponized migration that has happened throughout the European Union over the last 10 years. And I think you look at situations like the way they're managing their own nations, and we really want to put the health and safety and security of American citizens inside the hands of Denmark, who really can't even defend themselves without having the United States pay for the entire defense budget for NATO. I don't really know that I trust that. I mean, I would love to work with Denmark in any way possible. Listen, this is a good deal for Denmark. Whatever the president is putting forth for Denmark to purchase Greenland, if that conversation ends up happening, I know that Secretary Rubio is meeting with Denmark next week. This is a good deal for them. They are a largely socialist nation, right? They have free health care. They have free daycare programs. I mean, I absolutely love going and visiting Denmark. I don't know that I would want to live there, but they have great social programs for their citizens. So say something to the tune of $500 billion to Denmark would be absolutely monumental in being able to provide those things to their citizens, kind of in perpetuity that they already espouse as their values. And so I think that this is really more about the European Union just not liking Trump and not liking the way that the United States is handling our safety and security. But in 10 years, if China and Russia went unchecked, I think we would be telling a really different story. And the final point that I would make on this with the reaction of the leaders in the European Union is they want us in Ukraine. They want our United States dollars funding Ukraine and protecting the European Union from Russian aggression. And so why is this any different?
Okay, so Taylor, I want to ask you a question on your point that this is a good deal for Denmark. So some U.S. lawmakers are saying when Denmark and Greenland make it clear that Greenland is not for sale, the United States must honor its treaty obligations. Your response to that?
You know, I would like to see what the president does moving forward. I would like to see the negotiations that take place. I believe a lot of the rhetoric that's coming out of the European Union is just posturing from the EU. I think when they get in front of a table with President Trump, that they would understand how good of a deal this is. Listen, the last time the United States purchased a territory was actually from Denmark, the U.S. Virgin Islands. And so Denmark is not unfamiliar to the idea of nation building themselves and trading nations for, I think we bought Denmark in 1917 for like $25 million in gold or something therein. And so this is not unfamiliar for them. Greenland is not a strategic point for Denmark, but it is a very strategic point for the United States that has the capacity to do what is needed to be done on that island should we encounter a physical or continued cyber war with China and Russia. And Denmark knows that. I believe that whatever the president is proposing with them, they will eventually get on board because they understand the role that the United States plays, and not just the safety and security of the United States, but of the entire Western world.
Okay, so I also wanted to talk about some options here for acquiring Greenland. I have a clip of Secretary of State Marco Rubio's remarks on using military force. Just take a listen.
The president always retained the option. Every president, not this president, every president always retains the option. I'm not talking about Greenland. I'm just talking about globally. If the president identifies a threat to the national security of the United States, every president retains the option to address it through military means.
Taylor, so if the military gets involved, what is that going to look like when it comes to Greenland?
Well, that would have to, I believe that would have to undergo congressional action. There would be a lot of conversations that needed to happen. But the secretary is completely right. If it is better for the American people and Greenland, the citizens of Greenland want it, why does Denmark have any more claim to it than the United States does? So I think that that's up for the citizens of Greenland to have that discussion amongst themselves. I mean, you saw last year about this time, President Trump President Trump sent a delegation, which included J.D. Vance, Usha Vance, and then Charlie Kirk at the time to have conversations with the citizens of Greenland to discuss this. So this isn't something that is just out of the blue. This is something that has been in the works for a really long time. And I think the American people just need to wait and see the conversations that happen between the United States, Greenland, and Denmark.
Well, all right, Taylor, really appreciate your comments today. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Happy to.
The Trump administration has announced new dietary guidelines as part of its Make America Healthy Again agenda. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says poor nutrition makes the U.S. an outlier when it comes to health. More news after this break.
According to ancient Chinese medicine, purslane is considered a medicinal herb and is used to help lower cholesterol, improve vascular functions, and prevent diabetes. Perilla seeds can nourish the lungs and spleen. It is used to treat asthma and improve pulmonary functions. Puritang green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds from Hwangmae Mountain in South Korea. It contains over 90% of omega-3, 6, 7, and 9, the highest concentration possible without chemical additives. The soft gel is made of natural seaweed. It is 100% organic and vegan. Both adults and children can take it with peace of mind. Ancient recipes were passed down from heaven to bring prosperity and longevity. Puritang green vegetable omega-3.
Hi, my name is Brady. When I was born, my parents thought everything was okay. My mom and dad were so excited to take me home.
I still get goosebumps telling this story. Several days in, his skin started to become very cold and clammy. We noticed that he had become blue around his mouth, and something was just very off.
We packed up as fast as we could. Brady stopped breathing twice on the way to the pediatrician. And that was one of the #1 things that just haunts me to this day.
I was born with a congenital heart defect called aortic coarctation. If my parents waited just 1 more hour to drive me to the hospital, I would not be here today. But thanks to research funded by the American Heart Association, I had heart surgery that saved my life. But not every kid is as lucky as me, which is why we need your help. Just call the number on the screen or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help. Get people trained in CPR. Get more hospitals certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. And help fund the next medical breakthroughs to help save kids like me.
When you donate to the American Heart Association, you're helping save lives like my son. And now my son is happy and healthy thanks to the support of people like you.
When you call with your $19 a month, you'll get this really cool t-shirt as a thank you. Many children die from congenital heart defects. I can't wait to grow up to become a heart surgeon and fix babies' hearts, but until then, I'll keep helping the American Heart Association. So please join me. Just call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org to become a monthly donor and help save lives.
The United States could be dealing with Venezuela for an extended period of time. President Trump was asked by the New York Times how long the administration would demand direct oversight over the nation. Trump didn't give a definitive answer, replying, quote, "Only time will tell." When the Times questioned if it could take a year or longer, Trump said, quote, "I would say much longer." During the nearly 2-hour sit-down, Trump said the rebuilding process will be profitable and will include the taking of oil. The government today released a video showing a Coast Guard ship sailing alongside the Russian-flagged Marinera oil tanker. The U.S. seized the tanker yesterday. The U.S. had been pursuing the tanker since last month after it tried to evade a blockade on sanctioned oil vessels around Venezuela. The U.S. seized 2 Venezuela-linked oil tankers yesterday, including the Marinera. The Justice Department is investigating crew members of the ship for failing to obey Coast Guard orders. Attorney General Pam Bondi said criminal charges will be pursued against all responsible actors in response. Russia said the U.S. seizure of its oil tanker is illegal. The Russian Foreign Ministry has demanded that the American side ensure humane and dignified treatment of Russian crew members. The Senate today advanced a resolution that could limit President Trump's ability to conduct further attacks against Venezuela. Our reporter Arlene Richards takes a look at how past presidents conducted military strikes without approval from Congress.
The yeas are 52, the nays are 47. The motion is agreed to.
The Senate on Thursday narrowly advanced a Democrat-led resolution that could limit President Trump's authority to take further action in Venezuela. An approved amendment to the War Powers Resolution would require Trump to get congressional approval before striking Venezuela again. Trump's surprise attack on Saturday that resulted in the arrest of self-proclaimed leader Nicolas Maduro has come under significant scrutiny by mostly Democratic members of Congress. They have accused him of committing an act of war.
This was not simply a counter-narcotics operation. It was an act of war. This was a military action involving Delta Force, involving the Army, apparently involving thousands of troops.
Republicans have argued that the strike was justified.
We are not at war. We do not have U.S. armed forces in Venezuela, and we are not occupying that country.
This was one that did not require prior authorization by Congress. It just required notification. And all the administration officials did exactly what they were supposed to do on the timetable they were supposed to do it in.
The War Powers Resolution was signed in 1973 to limit a president's ability to engage military forces without congressional approval. The current resolution requires.
The War Powers Act states that notification should be made to Congress within 48 hours following the initiation of hostilities.
The resolution permits U.S. forces to remain in the country for a maximum of 60 days. Trump invoked his constitutional authority as well as the War Powers Resolution. He claimed the strike was justified as self-defense due to Maduro's involvement in trafficking drugs to the United States. Since 1973, presidents on both sides have used their constitutional powers to conduct strikes on foreign countries without pre-approval from Congress. In 1999, President Bill Clinton joined NATO forces in airstrikes against the former Yugoslavia. The reason? To address atrocities committed against Albanians in Kosovo. Clinton asserted his authority under the Constitution as well as the War Powers Resolution. Congress didn't declare war before the strike, nor did Clinton request their approval. U.S. forces continued the attack for 79 days, but Congress didn't force a halt. Presidents don't always rely on the War Powers Resolution. After the September 11th attacks, Congress passed a resolution that allowed presidents to conduct military force on Afghanistan and Iraq without approval. But presidents have used this permission to take action beyond those countries. Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama carried out strikes against terrorist groups in countries like Yemen, Somalia, and Pakistan. And presidents consistently rely on their constitutional powers for new situations. Obama asserted his constitutional powers and relied on a UN resolution for his 2011 attacks on Libya. He didn't seek congressional approval and assured that U.S. involvement would be limited in nature, duration, and scope. His aim was to help overthrow military leader Muammar Gaddafi. U.S. forces continued the strikes for 7 months, even though Congress voted against it continuing. But Congress didn't stop the strikes after 60 days. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The Trump administration announced new dietary guidelines yesterday as part of its Make America Healthy Again agenda. Today, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said poor nutrition made the U.S. an outlier when it comes to health.
The United States is the highest obesity and type 2 diabetes rate in the developed world. We spend 3 times more per capita than the European Union on health care, yet our life expectancy is 5 years shorter, largely due to diet-related chronic disease.
The new guidelines prioritize protein, fruits, and vegetables. HHS also recommends incorporating healthy fats from whole foods such as meats, seafood, eggs, nuts, seeds, olives, and avocados. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins joined Kennedy today to tout the new recommendations.
Having this sort of dietary nutrition will change, again, the course of American health and the course of American history.
Americans are also advised to focus on whole grains while reducing refined carbohydrates. The department also recommends limiting highly processed foods, added sugars, and artificial additives. And New York State is expanding free childcare. New York Governor Kathy Hochul and New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani announced the initiative today.
And today I'm proud to announce that New York State is paying the full cost to launch childcare for the first time. Universal daycare for 2-year-olds as proposed by Mayor Mamdani. And we're not just paying for 1 year of the program. We don't usually go 1 year out in our budget. But just to let you know how serious we are, we're taking the unprecedented step to not just commit for the 2027 budget, which I'm working on right now, but also the following year as well to show you we're in this for the long haul.
We will build on the city's existing 3K program and say no longer will a family in Flatbush be offered a seat but have to find out that that seat is in Astoria. We will add seats in the neighborhoods where demand has not been met. This will be felt by expanded subsidies for tens of thousands of additional families. It will be felt when parents look at their bank accounts at the end of the year and see that they have saved more than $20,000 per child.
For Mamdani, the announcement is a step toward fulfilling one of his primary campaign promises. According to Governor Hochul's office, the first year will focus on high-need areas selected by the city before expanding. New York will then work to expand access to universal pre-K statewide, aiming for the 2028 to 29 school year. Hochul is up for re-election this year. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem defended the ICE agent involved in the Minneapolis shooting amid controversy over the incident. What rules of engagement were ICE agents operating under? More after this break.
This is Pho-licious. Now, what is pho? It's an authentic Vietnamese noodle dish. The Pho-licious chicken pho brings the comforting, aromatic flavors of Vietnam to your bowl. And Mama Thu's signature spice blend. Well, this chicken pho is as close to homemade as it gets without the wait. Some cubed chicken, a little lime, and then the magic moment. See you soon, my friends.
Pho-licious is now available at your local Walmart or walmart.com.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, I have an important message about security. Write down the number on your screen so you can call when I finish. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. This is a lock for your life insurance, a rate lock that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. But be careful. Many policies you see do not have one. But you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. Call this number to learn more. This plan was designed with a rate lock for people on a fixed income who want life insurance that fits their budget and is simple to get. Coverage options start at $9.95 a month, less than 35 cents a day. Act now, and your rate will be locked in for life. It will never increase, guaranteed. This is lifelong coverage that can never be canceled as long as you pay your premiums, guaranteed. And your acceptance is guaranteed, with no health questions. You cannot be turned down because of your health. Call for your information kit and read about this rate lock for yourself. You'll also get a free beneficiary planner. Both are free with no obligation. Don't miss out. Call for information, then decide. Read about the 30-day 100% money-back guarantee. Don't wait. Call this number now.
Call now and you'll also get this free beneficiary planner. Use this valuable guide to record important information and your final wishes, and it's yours free just for calling. So don't wait. Call 1-800-357-4821 for your free information. That's 1-800-357-4821. There's no risk or obligation. That number again is 1-800-357-4821. That's 1-800-357-4821. 1-800-357-4821. Call now.
One of the biggest challenges my clients face is buying and selling a home at the same time. Many of my clients ask me, Tanya, how can I afford to buy my next home, but also make sure my current home sells? That's why who you work with matters. With HomeLight, we're able to help our clients buy and sell at the same time. It's the most game-changing product in real estate today. Together with HomeLight, we've helped clients win the home of their dreams.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem defended the ICE agent involved in the Minneapolis shooting amid controversy over the incident. Joining us to discuss is Jason Johnson, president of Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund and former police executive. So Jason, good afternoon. What happened in Minneapolis yesterday, of course, is a tragedy, and our hearts go out to the families impacted by this. But the other side of the story is that it doesn't necessarily mean the law enforcement officer acted unjustly. So I have a clip here of Vice President J.D. Vance commenting on what happened yesterday. So just take a listen to this.
The simple fact is, what you see is what you get in this case. You have a woman who was trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. Nobody debates that. You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator. Nobody debates that. I can believe that her death is a tragedy, while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making and a tragedy of the far left who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe, against our law enforcement officers.
Jason, first off, your thoughts on what happened yesterday?
Well, I would echo your sentiments at the top. It's clearly a tragedy. There was a loss of life that was entirely unnecessary. The investigation is underway, and there does need to be an investigation. I get concerned from my perspective when anyone weighs in, particularly people in leadership positions, weigh in with decisive information, people calling this a murder and calling for the prosecution of the ICE agent, or just wholesale exonerating it. I think it needs to be investigated. The Supreme Court tells us that in order to review cases like this, the basic legal standard is in this case, ICE agents' conduct has to be objectively reasonable in the totality of the circumstances, which means, in plain English, means that if a reasonable law enforcement officer in that officer's position would have made the same or similar decision, that's objectively reasonable. But we can only determine that after we know all the facts, not just on the basis of a few seconds of a video clip.
Okay, so exactly what are the rules of engagement when ICE agents operating that they're operating under? What is the use of force protocols?
So ICE, the federal government certainly has policies regarding the use of deadly force, but generally in law enforcement officers are authorized to use deadly force if the circumstances exist in which there is a direct and imminent threat to the officer's life, whether it could be death or serious bodily injury, or to another person. So either the officer themselves or to another person. If the officer believes and reasonably believes that the result of what is getting ready to happen will be death or serious bodily injury. So, presumably in this case, the officer believed when he used deadly force that his life, either his life or serious bodily injury would be the likely result of being struck by the vehicle, and that using deadly force would help him to avoid that. And I say presumably because I imagine that's why I use deadly force. The legal question here for this investigation is not whether the officer themselves actually believe that, but whether that belief was objectively reasonable. Would a reasonable officer in that position feel the same way and feel moved to have to use deadly force? And, again, I know that a lot of people want to weigh in, particularly people in, leadership positions, elected leadership positions have weighed in. The governor, the city, the mayor, the city police chief, on both sides. And so, the president has weighed in, Secretary Noem, Vice President Vance. I understand that it's required that they say something about it. My concern is when what is said with great confidence what the outcome should be of the investigation, and we don't know what the outcome of the investigation is.
So you referenced the clip earlier. We all saw that. So could you give us an idea of exactly, for an officer in a situation like this, what might he consider, the list of things he must consider before choosing to fire his weapon?
It's important, I think, to remember that if you put yourself in the officer's position, it's not quite as simple as what it looks like in a few second video clip, because there were things that happened before. There is context, right? So ICE as an agency has been under really rhetorical assault and sometimes literal assault over the last number of months as a result of rhetoric coming from supposed leaders, demonizing ICE, causing people, regular, normal people, as it sounds that this individual who's involved in this incident was just a person who believed what she was told, that it was her duty as a citizen to obstruct ICE and to hinder them in any way possible. And she was probably just responding to that, thinking she was doing the right thing. So these agents have been exposed to this over many months. They've had objects thrown at them. They've been assaulted. They've been demonized in every possible way. So anyone would come to that incident with that thought that, hey, someone might want to kill me here in this particular case. And so it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in the context of everything that has been happening. And the danger that exists when someone does try to obstruct your travel like that, that's legitimately a dangerous situation. Especially in right here, what you're showing on the screen, we have a crowd, and I understand there was a crowd even before the incident. So in their mind, they are very defensive. They are feeling that they will be assaulted. So that's what's running through their mind. And so even though the movement of the car, everyone has seen the video, the movement of the car itself does not appear to be that threatening. The movement is not that fast. The officer is not, has the ability to step out of the path. But it's important to remember, we're not just looking at what actually happened in those few seconds. You have to think about what happened before and during and what's in the officer's mind and what would be in any reasonable officer's mind in that circumstance.
Okay, so you're right about the context, and specifically referring to that few-second clip, there's actually more before that, right? Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said yesterday the officer who fired the shots was actually dragged by a vehicle and injured during an operation in June. And I just want to make it clear here. Are you saying that potentially that as well influenced his decision in firing that shot yesterday?
I can't tell you specifically what influenced this agent's decision, but certainly if his personal experience had been that when last time he was involved in a situation like this, he was actually dragged by a car. If that is true, certainly it's hard to imagine that didn't play into the decision making here. As human beings, our experience does play into our decision making, and so that's a plausible situation. Now, certainly, I don't know anything about that prior situation, but I've heard about it. I don't know the underlying facts, but I do think it's relevant, as are other facts that led to this incident. And I think the really important thing here is, like, an investigation is going to determine whether this was a lawful and proper shooting, right? What we do know, though, in addition to the fact that this is a tragedy, is that the cause of this, the underlying cause, is people in positions of authority demonizing ICE and essentially directing citizens to go out and obstruct them at every turn. And unfortunately, that's what this young mother did. It led to her demise. Had she not done that, she'd be with us today. And so, we'll resolve actually what happened as led up to the shooting, whether it was lawful and reasonable or not. But it doesn't change the fact that the reason it happened is all the dangerous rhetoric, and it really needs to stop.
Okay, so Jason, in cases where an officer uses lethal force and a life is lost, what do we know about the psychological impact this has on the officer involved? And what kind of support is provided to help them process and cope with that?
Yeah, and thank you for that question, because that's an important consideration here. Law enforcement officers are exposed to all sorts of human tragedy, no matter whether you're state, federal, or local. And when you're directly involved in a case like this, no matter how justified you feel in the moment to use deadly force, and no matter how justified you feel in the aftermath, it doesn't change the fact that you will carry the burden of having taken someone's life for the rest of your life. And so this is well documented, in the psychological community, that officers do need support. And many agencies, and I don't know exactly what ICE provides to their employees that are involved in critical incidents, but most contemporary law enforcement agencies provide considerable support to employees who are involved in difficult cases like this, just on a human level, that regardless of what the legal consequences might be, if there are any, the human toll on the individual and their family is truly significant.
Okay, Jason, just finally on the protests themselves, FBI Director Kash Patel told Just the News that they're investigating the organizers and funders of anti-immigration enforcement protests. And he said that these protests are impeding law enforcement activities and threatening public safety. So can we get your thoughts on whether you think these protests are organic, and when do they become a hindrance to law enforcement, these protests?
Many of the protests are not organic. They're organized and funded behind the scenes, and that's where, when people show up at protests, they've got all the signs that already are somewhat similar in appearance with slogans and things on them. Those are being provided and funded, by third parties. So, occasionally protests are organic. Most of the time around this issue of immigration and some of the other hot button issues today, they're not organic. They're well organized and they're well funded. In terms of impeding law enforcement, it's a sticky issue, because on the one hand, in America, we have a right to protest as long as what we're doing is lawful. You certainly cannot hinder law enforcement, as we saw, which led up to this shooting. That is unlawful, no question about that. And that's a great example of what can't happen. It cannot happen, and law enforcement has to take action to stop it. It's dangerous and it's not lawful. However, peaceful protest is lawful, and it'll continue to be lawful as long as we're the United States. But there is a fine line between peaceful, lawful protest and unlawful conduct, as we saw that led up to the shooting. We have to be able to differentiate between the two. When we use language, or people in leadership positions don't use language that makes clear what the difference is, then sometimes innocent people, well-meaning people who just intend to protest, wind up getting swept into unlawful conduct that, as we see, can have really, truly tragic results.
Okay, Jason, very valuable insight today. Thank you so much for talking with us.
You're welcome.
The Justice Department will be creating a new position to investigate government fraud funding. funding fraud. Hear the announcement from Vice President J.D. Vance from the White House today.
We know that the fraud isn't just happening in Minneapolis, it's also happening in states like Ohio. It's happening in states like California. And so what we're doing in order to help coordinate this remarkable interagency effort from the Trump administration, but also to make sure that we prosecute the bad guys and do it as swiftly and efficiently as possible, is we are creating a new Assistant Attorney General position who will have nationwide jurisdiction over the issue of fraud.
The vice president said this new assistant attorney general will start and focus primarily on Minnesota, but will also investigate alleged fraud nationwide. He said this person will be nominated in the next few days and go through the Senate confirmation process. Vance added that the Trump administration wanted to create this new position rather than a special counsel position. He said that's because an assistant attorney general is constitutionally legitimate and will not be bogged down by legal technicalities that special counsels face. The Commerce Department reports that the U.S. trade deficit dropped in October to its lowest level since 2009. Data shows the goods and services trade gap narrowed by 39% from September to $29.4 billion. Imports into the U.S. fell 3.2% to $331 billion in October, with exports jumping to $302 billion. Goods imports dropped 4.5% to $225 billion, the lowest level since June 2023. Imports of industrial supplies dropped to $2.7 billion, the lowest level since February 2021. Exports rose 2.6% to a record $302 billion. Goods exports jumped 3.8% to $195.9 billion. All-time high, that is. Separate polls of economists and analysts by Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal had predicted a $58 billion deficit. The Trump administration has withdrawn the United States from 66 international organizations, conventions, and treaties. The White House said yesterday they go against the country's interests. 31 entities were tied to the United Nations, while 35 others were not. The State Department says the Trump administration found the institutions to be redundant, wasteful, and poorly run. It also accused them of being captured by foreign interests or a threat to the nation's sovereignty, freedoms, and general prosperity. Secretary of State Marco Rubio accused many entities of being dominated by progressive ideology and detached from national interests. Rubio says many international organizations now serve a globalist project rooted in the, quote, discredited fantasy of the end of history. He mentioned DEI mandates, gender equity campaigns, and what he called climate orthodoxy. House Speaker Mike Johnson has formally invited President Trump to deliver the State of the Union address on February 24th. The speech will be Trump's first formal State of the Union of his second term and his sixth joint address to Congress overall. Trump is expected to highlight immigration enforcement, policy achievements, and foreign policy efforts as the midterm elections approach. Reviving traditional culture live on the stage. The Lord Mayor of Oxford tells NTD what struck her after watching genuine performing arts. More news after this.